What are some not fun facts? Crabs eat their babies and sloths can die from starvation with a full stomach. If you shine a flashlight smartphone on a newborn sea turtle for too long, which could be only minutes, it will start crawling around in circles, known as the ring of death. It means that the turtle's eyesight has been permanently damaged due to mistaking your lights for the moon that guides it to the sea. By doing this, you have doomed the sea turtle to death right after birth. Horses can't throw up. If they need to throw up, they'll die. Oh man, that grass was ass. Dies. Gingivitis is contagious. Heroin overdose is so prevalent and dangerous because of how fast tolerance bounces back. So let's say an addict gets arrested and is in jail for a few days, weeks, whatever. If they're a heavy user, even half the dose they last used could kill them. There is a whale called 52 Blue who sings at such a strange frequency he is unable to communicate with other whales. When it comes to heart disease, the very first symptom in roughly 1/3 of all cases is sudden death. Meaning you could be perfectly healthy and drop dead because you had heart disease and didn't know it. Check your family history, people. Some dogs have to get their anal glands squeezed by veterinarians, or their owners, if too much fluid gets stuck in them. Dogs usually help themselves with the issue though, by pooing or rubbing their butts on the floor. Sharks eat their siblings before birth equals there can be only one. There are 100 of them on average. It's the first battle royale. Babies can die after consuming honey. The botulinum toxin, like the one in Botox, will paralyze their muscles, causing floppy baby syndrome. Criminals that are considered unattractive usually receive a 50% longer jail time than attractive criminals. The sun occasionally lets out supermassive bursts of plasma energy called coronal mass ejections. These could knock out our satellites, power grid and internet for decades. One barely missed us in 2012, and another has about a 10% chance of happening in the next 10 years. I've also heard though that we can prepare ahead of time by shutting down electricity for a few days when the strike hits. So people may be without power for a few days, but it wouldn't destroy infrastructure. You're correct there. It's also worth noting that we've gotten way better at monitoring these things. We would know it's happening far before it struck us. At the very least, with a worldwide blackout, and the effect a CME has on our planet's magnetic field, the northern lights would be seen from everywhere, and be brilliantly beautiful. Brain aneurysms can happen at any time in your life and you won't know until it's too late or if a doctor accidentally finds it. Some whales, when old, no longer have enough strength to swim for as long, so if they swim too deep, they might not have enough strength to swim back up to get air, so they end up drowning. Edit. Some people smarter than I have pointed out that they technically don't drown, but instead suffocate from the lack of air. This is apparently because whales have to manually breathe instead of it being done automatically, and their death creates a whole new ecosystem like meaty dead coral reef brimming with life. On the topic of dead whales, whenever they die and their bodies reach the surface, they will eventually explode like a balloon. The reason they reach the surface is the same as why they blow up: gas buildup. You can die from Alzheimer's due to the brain forgetting how to swallow or breathe. That's usually how you die from Alzheimer's. There's a plant in Australia called the Gympie tree that has hairs all over it that are small enough and are compared to hypodermic needles. And whenever a person touches the plant, these hairs stick into your skin and inject a toxin that causes a pain compared to the affected area being covered in acid and set on fire. And what makes it worse is that the pain lasts months to years. Pretty sure there was a guy that used it for toilet paper. Forensic investigators love people with tattoos. It makes their job so much easier. There are a few things that, if you flush down the toilet, will most certainly make it into the hands of the operator at your local water plant. They are called the 3 C's: condoms, cockroaches, and corn. Hedgehogs can get a disease called wobbly hedgehog syndrome, which is an adorable name for hedgehog myth. The Cavalier King James Spaniel has been inbred to the point where about 70% show signs of syringomyelia, a condition when its skull is too small for its brain. As its brain grows, the pressure on it causes extreme distress and pain, and they flop around looking like they have a seizure until the vet drills a hole in its skull to release the pressure. And bulldogs can only give birth via C-section cause their heads are too big for their mom's hips, and pugs are struggling to breathe their whole lives. Shameless plug to go to a shelter and not a small dog breeder, but definitely also non-fun facts. Dolphins will use decapitated fish heads to masturbate. If you think I am joking, look it up. The Spanish flu is one of the most lethal pandemics in history, edited out the most. There are lots of elements that determine the deadliness of these various diseases and too much uncertainty and death tolls to say for sure which disease was the most lethal. People who caught it bled from their ears, experienced nausea and extreme fever, their skin turned shades of blue, and experienced extreme pain from the slightest touch. It caused internal hemorrhaging. 1835 adults' immune systems, which would typically be considered the strongest, would react so strongly that their bodies would fill up with antibodies and fluid, literally drowning the infected with their own defense mechanism. This happened for a specific reason. See Peakman's comment. Edit. If you are looking for a good source, The Great Influenza by John M. Barry is a good one. The outside of your eye prevents your immune system from ever knowing about the inside of your eye. If a puncture allows the two to meet, your immune system may attack and destroy your eye as an invader. Terms for the horrified who cling to their skepticism as a shield against acknowledging this unfun fact to Google: immune privilege of the eye. You're welcome. And that's why if one eye gets damaged and goes blind, you can lose both eyes. The immune system attacks the other intact eye, causing it to go blind. A cat's penis is sharply barbed along its shaft. That's because female cats only ovulate in response to having their vaginas internally stabbed. That sounds horrible and makes me wonder why cat populations are out of control. Cats are sadomasochists. Japanese used to use prisoners to test how many bodies their sword was. For example, they would stack prisoners on top of each other, and however many the sword went through was how many bodies the sword was. You may have heard on several occasions that coal-fired plants release more radiation than a nuclear plants, and it's true, but the reason why is a bit disturbing. Nuclear power plants are closed systems, so whatever radiation that comes from it has to punch its way through several tons of steel and concrete. Coal-fired plants are not closed systems. They dig stuff out of the ground and burn it, releasing all waste to the air. Coal goes through very minimal processing before it's burned compared to other sources of fuel. After it is dug, the coal is washed, and mostly that gets rid of impurities such as sulfur and rocks of various minerals. However, there always remains a trace of impurities, and those impurities can be made up of naturally occurring radioactive elements, such as radium. The presence of radium in coal is usually in very small trace amounts, but when a coal-fired plant burns 9,000 tons of coal every day, it adds up, which means it releases more radiation than a nuclear power plant, and it's more dangerous because that radiation is coming from particles that are just out there, floating around in the air, which you can inhale. BTW. Dolphins have been known to violently rape female dolphins in groups. They rape people too. That's why I have no interest in swimming with them. What? An elephant can control its dick and kill you with it. Horses can also freely move their dicks, and often swing it around to masturbate. The wondrous smell you get while cutting grass is actually a chemical distress signal. You're smelling the silent screams of your lawn. Real life not fun fact: after a vasectomy there are still healthy living sperms in your semen. You'll have to ejaculate for about 50 times before you are out of them. Can confirm. My uncle got a vasectomy and his wife was pregnant with twins a few weeks later. In some parts of Australia 90% of koalas are suffering with chlamydia, which is threatening extinction of the species unless a vaccine is developed or massive koala culling happens. Wouldn't be a problem if koalas weren't such rapists. You'd think I'm joking, but I'm not. If you have two pregnant cows give birth at the same time and one cow's calf dies and the other mother cow dies, leaving her calf orphaned, you can skin the dead calf and drape the skin over the living calf. Then the living mother will believe the orphaned calf is hers by smell and pattern of the skin and feed the calf, keeping it alive. Edit. I just woke up for milking and to my surprise this post got a fair bit of attention, haha. I should note people nowadays would only do this if they had only the 2 cows and no neighbors to get milk off to hand raise the calf. Working on a dairy where we have many cows calving at the same time, we can just leave them with a group of mothers and someone will feed it. Usually we will milk the mother cow and hand feed the calves in a shelter as we're not a huge dairy. Second edit. A calf needs the first milk from a mother cow that's just calved. This milk is called colostrum. It contains all the antibodies that fight infections and bacteria and help boost the calf's immune system. You must get this into the calf within 6-12 hours of the calf's birth to help it survive and be healthy. If you only own the 2 cows and you have this exact scenario where one mother died and the other mother's calf dies and she refuses to take on the orphan calf and you have no neighbors with colostrum to bottle feed it, then this would be one way for you to keep this calf alive. Again, for the people who are saying other mothers take on the calves, this is true, but in the scenario I'm suggesting the farmer only owns the 2 cows. When one dies you're only left with the 1 cow, no other mothers to take on the calf. If you get a roach infestation bad enough, they will eat your skin while you sleep. They will also crawl into your ear, which is a horrible, horrible experience. The reason you shouldn't eat raw cookie dough isn't because of getting sick from eating raw eggs. You're pretty unlikely to get sick from eating a raw egg these days. The real reason is because you shouldn't eat raw flour, as it contains fecal matter from all the birds that pooped on the wheat while it was growing in the field, and there's no practical way to remove it during processing.